going and set a date, and then also tell your friends so you're accountable. So you need to commit to something. So obviously, I could easily say, okay, I'm going to try and beat my marathon PB and keep on saying it for like 3 or 4 months, but never set a date and never really tell anyone. Whereas if I set a date, say, okay, I'm going to do it on 25th of December, I'm going to run this distance or do that, and then I start telling my friends, you're accountable. It's like entering a race and telling your friends you're accountable to how you perform on that given day.
On the Healthy Human Revolution podcast, Dr. Lori Marbas interviews nutrition and lifestyle medicine experts and extraordinary guests whose informative and inspiring stories will empower you with the knowledge to transform your life and health.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Lori Marbas, and today I'm so honored to welcome Donnie Campbell. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us from the Highlands of Scotland. And you are an ultra distance marathoner who just completed an impressive feat of running the Munros of Scotland. And there was 282. And so a Munro would be a mountain equivalent here in the US, correct? Am I right in my translation?
Yeah, so basically we don't have massive hills in Scotland. The highest hill is Ben Nevis, which is basically 1,300 meters and a bit. So basically, a Munro is classified as a top over 3,000 feet or 914 meters high. So there's 282 of them in Scotland. So yeah, I ran all of them in August. They're all spread out all over Scotland. So you've got Ben Hope, which is way up north near Cape Wrath, Johnny Goat Sullivan Way. And then you've got the most southerly, which is Ben Lomond, which is kind of near like Glasgow area and Loch Lomond side.
Excellent. And so you did all that in 31 days, which was, all right. So I have the stats here, and you tell me if, I can't even imagine what this is like. So you did that in 31 days. The previous record was, I believe, 37 or 36?
39 days. So I did it in 31 days and 20 hours.
Amazing.
23 hours, sorry. And the previous record was 39 days and 9 hours.
Oh my goodness. So basically you did kayaking and cycling and running between these. Your wife was a huge support, I appreciate that. And climbed over basically 126,143 meters, which is the equivalent of 78 miles of climbing.
Yes.
I can't even imagine the feat. So can you tell us a little bit about, number one, why you would want to do that? Because it just, for most of us, it's like just climbing one mountain. We have 14,000 feet, mountains here. I see one out my window, and that's an all day adventure. You did this. I just can't imagine. So can you explain maybe why you chose to do that or how you got into it?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to climb all the Munros in Scotland. So obviously we mentioned there's 282 of them. And most people, most Munro baggers, that's what they're called, hill climbers in Scotland that climb Munros, called Munro baggers. Most people will try and climb them all in a lifetime. And I found out since I've done it, the average time it takes someone to complete all the Munros is about 23 years. So that's kind of giving you a rough background of how people normally do the Munros. And then also you get like the crazy people like myself that like to go try and do them in as quick as time as possible. So, you can go quite far back in the history and look at, people doing complete Munro rounds, so kind of setting out, see how fast they can do them. And they've been done in different styles. So, for example, Hugh Simmons ran all the Munros and ran in between them. I think that was in the 80s, and then carried on, ran in the hills in England and Wales, which is incredible. But the last couple of fast Munro rounds have been in a self-propelled style. So it's kind of been either running and then cycling in between the Munros, because you're covering massive difference. Obviously, Scotland's tiny compared to the USA, but it's still fairly big to get around, and they're all spread out. So using the bike to get to the different mountain ranges, and then some obviously are on an island, so you have to kayak. So that's what appealed to me. So I've always wanted to climb all the Munros in Scotland. But I'm fairly fussy. Like, Scotland's got quite a lot of boggy hills, and the west coast of Scotland's more rugged, more alpine, more rocky, so maybe a bit more like your Rockies. And I kind of favour them type of Munros. I do them over and over again, and not really do like the rounded plateau kind of summits over in the eastern side of Scotland. So Yeah, so last year I basically decided I was going to go and do a Monroe round. It's been on my mind for like 2 or 3 years. And like last year, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a year out of racing, so I do a lot of racing, and focus on doing a self-propelled Monroe round. And then kind of looking at the previous times, and previous time being Stephen Pike's, which was the record at the time was 39 days and 9 hours, which is an incredible record to try and beat. So yeah, as you kind of put a schedule together in the autumn, looking at the maps, kind of trying to plan a route. And I didn't plan, ended up having a 33-day schedule, but didn't plan a 33-day schedule. I basically looked at what I could do on any given day in training. And then they just kind of consecutively built that up. So for example, on day 3, I did 65K with about 5,500 meters of ascent. And I did that in training for the Monroe round. And I know I can go and do these kind of days as an individual training day. The big question was, could I do these days consecutively for 30 plus days? And that's how my schedule came about. I looked at what I could physically do in one day in training, and then I just put them back to back, back to back. And that's how it came out at 33 days. So yeah, it was a tall task. And I did it, say at the start, it was a very ambitious schedule.
Right. And then there was some very incredible weather challenges, I'm sure, because Scotland is north and cold and wet.
Yeah. I actually got very lucky with weather. Like, I'm not going to lie, I had near perfect conditions. So in Scotland in the summer, you're never going to get 30 plus days of blue skies, sunshine. You're always going to get a fair bit of wind and rain. And there's only like maybe 3 or 4 days that really kind of stick in my mind that were like, yeah, they were brutal weather-wise. So it's like typical Scottish summer. So it's like horizontal rains. The rain was coming in horizontal and hitting you on the side of the face, and gale force winds that were buffeting about the hill. So there's only like 2 or 3 days of that. And there's quite a few days where it was just grey, and a good Scottish word, greek, which is just like grey and damp, and everything just gets damp, but it's not overly cold, it's just greek. And then I had some nice weather as well, so I can't really complain.
Yeah, I lived in Washington State, which is in the Northwest, which is 10 months of rain, constant. Just everything's wet, always. So I get it. So you did this incredible feat, but not everybody can do that. So how do you go from a young man in Scotland? I mean, it sounds like you were also in the Marines. I'm a vet as well, so I totally appreciate that. And you had spent some time in the Middle East, as have I. So I get that part of that. But I was in the Air Force and a doctor. It's a little different. But as far as, the mentality and the training, how did you go from, I guess a young man, and then you went to the Marines young and then decided to go into ultramarathon? It's probably comparable as far as mental toughness, but how do you deal with all that? Like on your tough days, and just kind of tell us what goes on the inside of your mind when all this is occurring.
Kind of, yeah, I'd obviously, for this kind of challenge that I've just done, I'd probably say I've been training all my life. Bit of background, I grew up in Isle of Skye, which is like the west coast of Scotland. And I played, I've always been fairly sporty. So I played shinty, which is a Scottish game. It's also played in California. I've actually been to America to play shinty before in San Francisco. So Northern California have a shinty team. So, sorry about that side story. But anyway, I used to play shinty. To quite a high level. I played for Scotland under 17 squads in development, and they used to play the Irish. That's the only international game you could have. Gotcha. So I did that till I was 17, and then I joined the Marines at 17. Got sold the dream of travel the world. Like I was always into kind of outdoor adventure kind of stuff, not realizing when they say travel the world, it's not your scenic places you're going to. So
the desert.
So I did that for 3.5 years, and then kind of went into sports coaching and development. I went into uni and studied sports coaching and development. Okay. When I was kind of that age of 17, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to join the Marines or go to university. So I went to the Marines and then went to university afterwards. And it was at university, just after I finished university, that I got into long distance running. So back in 2009, basically usual university lifestyle. You drink too much, you party too hard, you eat loads of takeaways. You don't really look after. So I was actually getting fit to play shinty to a relatively high standard, because that's my sporting background. And it was a friend who said, why don't you come and do this race on Island Enduro, which is 2 Scottish islands. It's about 150 miles long over 5 days. So it's like MDS style racing. And it just appealed to me. It's like, that's why I joined the Marines. It was these types of adventures of just traveling on foot, or using your self-propelled momentum to cover distance and see wildlife. So I did that and just really enjoyed that, and that's how I got into ultra running. So obviously your question was, how do I deal with the very low points?
Yeah.
So obviously all these experiences I've had helps me when I'm low, so I can recall when, like, for example, I've been at a low point in a race before, or I've ran for 44 hours previously, so I know I can go for 44, 48 hours without having to sleep. So I draw on these experiences. And again, to a certain extent, so like on day 17, I've said in other podcasts that it was my lowest day by far. I was just in a really low pace, but I've never thought of quitting, even though I was saying, what's the point? There's no point in running hills. I'd lost the focus, and I was just like questioning why I was doing it. I wasn't enjoying it at the time. Honestly, I wasn't enjoying it. And I was like, I could just go home. I'd be happy to go home, but it wasn't like I was ever going to actually seriously go home. Because it's just basically, I describe it as like, you have a bad day at your job. You go home, you'll whinge to your wife or your partner or a friend. The next day you get up and you go back to work. And that's what I was doing at that time. My job was, I get up, I run Munros. No matter the weather, no matter how I was feeling, that's my job. I got up at 5 a.m., start running by 6. And that's kind of like, just routine helped me get through the lower points, and then just, trying to focus. So kind of using sports psychology. So kind of just focusing on the next Munro, goal setting, positive self-talk, all these kind of tricks of the trade from like sports psychology can help motivate you through as well. And another thing that really motivated me is I'm quite stubborn, and I like proving people wrong. So there was a few people that said, like, that was a very ambitious schedule, I don't know if it's possible. And I was like, well, I'm going to do my best to show you it is possible. So yeah.
I appreciate that. I went to medical school with 3 little kids, and I had a few people tell me I couldn't do it. I was like, oh yeah, watch. and now my daughter's about to graduate medical school, so it's
Awesome.
all worked out well. Yeah. So as far as when you say sports psychology, that's a deep field. What parts or tricks did you use yourself? So you said you're speaking and focusing on the future, but I mean, there will be points like when someone is just going through just physically exhausted. I mean, I've done 40-hour calls at the hospital, but I was exhausted. I can't imagine moving my body to different places. Like, I know how I had to, because I have patients to take care of, but what are you speaking to your mind, just to kind of help people understand the self-talk that you're doing, or whatever sports psychology particular things that you're doing?
It's hard to say. So, you're kind of going through highs and lows. And so, like, because I really cared passionately about wanting to do all the Munros, it was something I invested a lot of time in. It was something I really wanted to achieve. I had high motivation going into it, so I didn't have to motivate myself on that. And I knew, like, after like 3 or 4 days, I was already up in the previous record, because that's where my schedule was. And on day 17, when I had my low point, I was 2 days up in the schedule. So I could, in theory, have had 2 days rest. But I was kind of wanting to see how far I could push myself. And that's kind of my nature, is I want to see how far I can go through the low points and come out the other side. And obviously, I've been running for over 10 years now. You can draw on other experiences. So other experiences where you kind of felt like really cold or wet, and you managed to get through, you're going to come out the other end, your state of mind's going to change. And then also, some of the positive self-talks is just like, come on, let's just focus on the next hill, and just telling yourself to focus on the next Munro or the next hill. Because on day 17, all I could see was like another 14 days of suffering. So I had like over another 14 days to go. So I knew kind of going into the challenge, this is kind of like visualization as well of sports psychology. I kind of visualized, I knew round about the middle of the challenge was going to be the toughest point, because so far from the start, so far to the finish, I knew mentally that's going to be the toughest. It's going to be like Groundhog Day. You're doing 12, 14-hour days in the mountains. There's no end in sight. And I had lost focus of just focusing on a day at a time and Munro at a time. So I was just trying to bring that focus back down, because I knew I was expecting to go through that low point and feeling like there was so far to go. I knew when I'd hit it, I was like, yeah, I was expecting this. I was expecting the low points. Let's just work through it. Let's just keep going. And again, routine helps. So obviously my routine for the last 14 days was get up, keep going no matter how I felt, just focus on getting to the next Munro and just keep moving forward at whatever speed I could manage on that. So Yeah, it's a combination of factors. You know, it wasn't one specific word or, you know, technique. It's strong on all of them. And also, you know, the one I mentioned previously about kind of using negative feedback that I got from, it wasn't negative, it was well-meaning, but I just used it as motivation to push myself on and keep going, as well as that kind of external motivation, just to try and prove some people wrong on that. So there's loads of different techniques kind of rolled into one. So it's hard to say, but it's just, main one is experience, getting out there and experiencing it. And then as you get more experience, you know how to push a bit harder and a bit further.
Awesome. So you kind of know how to self-propel even in those worst conditions mentally, because you've been there before. Just like training in the military, they prepare you for, you just do what you do because it's second nature at that point. So excellent. So now when you're doing all of this, obviously there's a large physical demand and you have to fuel yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about your diet? And, you know, I know you definitely are plant strong. Can you share with us how you discovered more of a plant-based diet and what compelled you to move in that direction?
Cool. So obviously, my other job is a sports coach, so I coach other athletes. So I always keep an eye, well, not keep an eye, I always research, read the latest studies. And, you know, the latest studies coming out a couple of years ago was, you know, going more towards plant-based diets. It wasn't a definite, yes, this is going to give you an extra 2 or 5% performance gains. But you're looking at what the other elite athletes were doing, not just from trail running and ultra running background, but from other endurance sports, obviously like tennis, 5 sets, 5-6 hours games, you know, like Djokovic, these kind of people. Then you're looking at some of the elite Kenyan marathon runners. I've been to Kenya, I've looked at eating, and I've looked at the diet. They're not wholly plant-based, but the majority of the diet is veg and ugali, which is a grain. And the reason they don't eat a lot of meat is because they're poor, so they can't afford meat.
Right.
But that's by default. But they're world-renowned as good marathon runners. And then you're looking at a lot of the other elite level sports, even in ultra running and tennis and even football, and you're kind of looking at what their feedback is. And I'm always one to experiment on myself. So it was probably about 2 years ago, I was like, okay, well, I'll try going plant-based at the start of January, go veganuary, what it was called. I don't like using the term vegan because obviously I wear leather shoes and kind of stuff like that. It's more nutritional. I got into it for nutritional benefits, for performance gains, but I also agree with it environmentally as well. Like, I agree that we should, as a population, as worldwide, should reduce our meat consumption. I think it's not realistic for everyone to go plant-based, but I think if we reduce our meat consumption, then it'll make a big difference environmentally. Sorry for a sidebar on that. So yeah, I basically tried it for January, and what I found was I wasn't all of a sudden a lot faster. What I found was I was recovering better between sessions. So obviously I felt better going into the following sessions. And I just really enjoyed the food. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, I like my food. And I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I kind of just end up sticking to it. Not that I had to force myself to stick to it, I actually enjoyed it. And I didn't really miss anything of what I used to have. The only thing I'd probably miss, and I had it during the round just because it adds more calories, it's like Parmesan cheese on top of pasta and stuff like that. And people say, oh, why don't you have plant-based cheese? And it's like, well, that's terrible for you. So it defeats the purpose of me going plant-based if I'm just swapping out cheese for basically coconut saturated fat. You know, it doesn't make any sense on that as an athlete. So, you know, if I want to have cheese on top of my pasta, I will.
Right.
I don't all the time. I'm very rarely at home. But if I'm on a big adventure like that, then I probably would, because you get a psychological boost from eating foods that you like, and also there's a bit more protein, a bit more calories. So it's not bulky on that. So yeah, that's kind of my journey into plant-based. And again, I don't let it restrict my diet either. It's another thing I kind of made a conscious effort to do. So, for example, if I'm driving about Scotland, I go to a petrol station and they haven't got like a plant-based sandwich. I'm not going to end up just eating 2 bags of crisps for my lunch because I can't eat like a vegetarian sandwich or that. I just defeat the purpose of having a healthy, balanced diet, if that makes sense. Yeah,
no, for sure. Absolutely. And then I've been on a plant-based diet for 9 years and have had tremendous results with patients and athletes. I have had some athletes that I've worked with as well. And it's a phenomenal way of eating. All 3 kids are plant-based. My husband lost 60 pounds. And I'm also a runner, not to that degree, but I do enjoy running. And it has really helped because I'll be 50 in a few weeks. And so it's not like, the world changes as you get a little older.
Yeah.
So it's a phenomenal thing to be able to keep going and fuel your body that way. So that is really cool. So can you tell us a little bit about like, what were you eating each day? And I mean, that's a lot of calories to consume. So what were you fueling your body with each of
Cool.
those
So
days?
my typical breakfast was 4 slices of wholemeal toast with almond butter, blueberry jam, and chia seeds, and 2 cups of tea and a can of Red Bull. And that was fine. That was my normal breakfast. The can of Red Bull was just getting me going in the morning with the extra caffeine. And then when I was out moving in the mountains, I was trying to get 90 grams of carbohydrate an hour. Like, there's a recent study showing that in mountain marathons and long distance, your body can tolerate up to 120 grams of carbohydrate every hour.
Oh, wow.
I tried that in training, and I tried it at the start, and I just found I was leaving myself nauseous with too much carbohydrates. Your gut is trainable, as you probably will know. I found the perfect balance is around about 90 grams of carbohydrate. It wasn't an exact science. I wasn't like measuring out every hour. I just kind of knew roughly I was round about that ballpark. It might be slightly low 1 hour, slightly over the next hour. But yeah, aiming for around about 90 grams of carbohydrate every hour when I was moving. And I was getting that in a mixture of active root, which is basically a carbohydrate sports drink with ginger root extract. It's basically raw cane sugar, citric acid, and ginger root extract, which I can drink gallons of and not get any GI distress from, which is great. And then on top of that, I'd be in Cliff Bars, Crit Bars, and mainly Shot Blocks. They're the main food. And then occasionally towards the end of the day, I might have, if I was near the van, I'd have a can of Red Bull, or if not, I'd have like a SI, Science and Sports caffeine gel, just for like the last big climb of the day. On that. And then if it was a day where I was kind of in between Munros and I was getting back to the van for lunch or that, my lunch would normally be like 2 plant-based sausage rolls and a cup of tea or something like that. So 2 rolls and a cup of tea. And then my evening meals were mainly plant-based, so it's like pasta with veg and tofu, or lentil bolognese. Beyond Meat burgers, I must admit, I do like a Beyond Meat burger. Stacks of protein. And then also, if I was near a pizzeria, I do like my pizzas as well, so I'd be having pizzas as well. So yeah, that's kind of like my day's nutrition. And yeah.
So my goodness. So what were your wife's days like? So, I mean, we've had a friend who tried to self-support. I don't know if you've heard of the Leadville 100 here, but which is just a couple hours from where I live. And they canceled it because of COVID, and there was also fires near here. But so they wanted to do self-supporting, and one of our friends who lost 120 pounds on the plant-based diet got into ultramarathoning, and he's like, "Can you guys, be my pacer, and someone, Lori, be the medical support?" And I'm like, "Sure, but I'm bringing IVs and who knows what else we're going to need up there," and I tend to get excited and think of things. So my husband was going to run the first 50 with him, and the smoke was so bad, they ended up ending around 28 miles. It was the particulates were horrible. Yeah. But what was interesting was all the different foods that they were consuming, but is rather, and they're pulling out sodas that they'd never drink. They're doing shot blocks, but what a wonderful excuse to eat all these foods that you wouldn't normally eat. But what was interesting is the recovery period. I read an article about you, and you'd use the squeezers, the recovery boots, and those are such a fascinating thing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Why you would do that? Because it reminds me in the hospital, when someone's in the hospital, they have those. They've had them for years, 20 plus years, to keep blood clots from people who are laid up. But you guys are using them for recovery. What happens when you do that? So can you just explain a little bit about that?
So basically my end of day routine would be get back to the van, have a recovery drink, which is an Science and Sports Rego, and then get into what you describe as recovery pumps. So it's 2 big compression bags for the legs. And basically it just compresses the legs, simultaneously working at your ankles all the way up. And it's just pushing the fluid back to your central body to sort of processes. And also helps get rid of any inflammation. So obviously I was dealing with tibia tendinopathy in my right leg at the start, and then left tibia tendinopathy. So my ankles were getting swollen. So that really helped getting the recovery pump on, getting them elevated a bit, just helps flush the swelling out. So it made a big difference. I was sitting on for about 45 minutes to an hour. And because you can do other stuff while you're sitting on them, it's not like you're foam rolling or stretching where you can't eat or relax. It was a good way of recovery, because while I sat in there, I could drink a cup of tea, have some biscuits or some crisps while my dinner was cooking. So yeah, that was just basically part of the recovery process. And I found it made a difference, just kind of flushing the legs out. You know, it's maybe just like at the end of the day, you go for a cool down and you just like spin the legs on a spin bike or something. It just helps flush the legs out.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And then what was your wife's days? Did she share with you some of her own adventures? Because that's a lot of work, traveling, and you're following people where they are and meeting them and pulling everything out, making sure they're okay at their stops and keep going. It's a lot crewing.
Yeah. Like I openly say, like I would still be on Mull, which is the first Munro, if it wasn't for my wife and my support crew. My wife Rachel did an amazing job. And like it was completely a team effort. Like, you know, she was working just as hard as I was to keep me going. Like she was pretty much doing everything for me. So, you know, for example, I would come back to the van and I would just dump my running vest, and she would empty all the rubbish out, empty the water bottles, get it ready for the next day. You know, that's a massive task. Then she was obviously making dinner, making breakfast, doing the washing up, doing my washing, you know, even taking my socks off some days when I was in agony. You know, it's that kind of thing. You know, she was doing so much. And then also she was having to drive the van to different places, clean the van, fuel the van. Yeah, so she had a fair bit of adventures as well. So yeah, it was a complete team effort. And even the people that kind of came and like helped with some of the kayak sections and dropped some home baking off or some cooked meals, you know, it was a great team effort. I'm really thankful, and I'm well aware that if it wasn't for the team behind me, I wouldn't have been successful. Yeah, like for example, there's some days like she had an adventure, like I got to the finish point before she managed to get to me because it was such a long drive, and it was a Saturday up a single track road, so she was completely stressed. I was fairly stressed. I thought she'd been in a car accident or something, or the van had broken down. So I was there for about 20 minutes, half an hour, like no one about, and I was just been in the hills for like 8 hours, completely destroyed. But yeah,
Wow. Jeez.
good stories.
Yeah, those are. There's so many interesting stories, I'm sure there. Can you tell us a little bit about, now you also obviously are an amazing athlete, but you also help coach others. Can you talk to us a little bit about your coaching and how you actually became into that, and how can people, you know, what can they expect when they work with you?
Cool. So I've always had a sporty background, and like originally, even before I went down sports coaching development at uni, when I was like under 17s, I was playing shinty. I was helping out at the youth levels at shinty back at home. So I was kind of into coaching even at an early age. And then also when I kind of left the Marines and went to university, I ended up doing a bit of shinty coaching, and then also did more team coaching. So basically I had football or soccer qualifications as a coach. I was a kayak coach. I coached shinty. So I had a whole big background, and then left university and went down like a personal training kind of side of stuff. So in a commercial gym, which I hated because it was like, I want to get big or I want to lose weight. And you'd ask them, well, what exercises do you enjoy? Do you enjoy the gym? And they're like, no, I hate the gym. And you're like, well, why are you coming here? You're not going to stick at it. And I'm like, find a sport you like doing. Go for a run, go cycling, go play London. And I'm sitting there in a gym that I don't even like. So that's how I ended up setting up my own business as a specific running coach or endurance-based athlete coaching. And that's kind of what I specialize in. So kind of coaching philosophy then, I'd probably just say, I treat everyone as an individual. Like you'll read online loads of different ways of coaching and training and stuff. And training is not an exact science. Obviously, there's still a lot we don't know about how the body adapts to different stresses. And again, I think the reason they don't know exactly is because everyone's different, so everyone adapts differently to stresses. So it's finding out what best training approach works for that individual and in their life, and obviously time constraints. So yeah, it's kind of, based on my coach philosophy, everyone's an individual, treat them as an individual and try and find what works best for them.
Cool.
So there's one size fits all.
And you work with beginning athletes through the elite level, correct?
Yeah. So I work with people wanting to, get into running. So people want to run the first 5, 10, half marathon, to people finishing on podiums at ultra marathons and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a big wide range, which is enjoyable because you're just kind of working through different coaching, and everyone's different, so it keeps it nice and varied. So I really enjoy my job, and I do find it really rewarding, when you work with an athlete for maybe 3 or 4 years to help them achieve a big massive goal and they achieve it. It's really rewarding, that kind of side of stuff as well. So you get quite attached to them.
Cool. And then, so is there any stories that you like to work with, or maybe some tough cases that you help people break through, or anything like that, in that sense of, because working with others, it's kind of like working with patients, right? Is you're reaching a health goal, changing their lifestyle. It's a lot of coaching. So what is some of your more memorable clients?
Most of them are quite memorable. The one that stands out for me, one I'm kind of fairly proud at, because a few years ago when I was based in Edinburgh, I used to do some one-to-one coaching as well, so something like strength and conditioning. And I had like a 60-year-old lady come to me saying she wanted to run the West Highland Way race. And the doctor she had been to said she couldn't run. Her knees were like, can't remember what it was. She had problems with her knees and stuff. And she'd seen doctors said that you're not going to be able to run. And I was like, okay, well, but what we'll do is we'll start from scratch, give it a 3-year program. So 3 years out, we'll work towards 3 years. So West Highland Way is like a 95-mile race.
95 miles?
Yeah.
Wow.
So basically that was a 3-year project. And like she bought into like being patient and just kind of doing a lot of strength and conditioning and rehab and building it up. And then she went on to be successful and run it, but not only run it once, but she ran it for like 3 years straight. So yeah, that's kind of got to be up there as one of the best ones. And then also, even just getting people, inspiring them to take up running, just someone that gets in touch says, look, you've inspired me to get up running. And everyone's kind of got their different goals. If it's helping someone to achieve their first marathon, it's a great feeling that someone cares so passionately about running their first marathon, you help them achieve that, to helping an athlete finish on a podium. They're both really rewarding in different ways. So I enjoy like helping the athletes achieve their goals, and I feel bad when they don't, because I kind of not take it personally, but I feel like I question myself, is there anything I could have done better as a coach? And so I'm always kind of self-evaluating myself to see, if I can do better, or if I made a mistake somewhere or that. So I'll put my hands up. I don't know everything as a coach. I'm still learning on that. So yeah, it's kind of a two-way communication, but yeah, it's great when they are successful.
And so you would do through the internet or virtual training along with in-person training on non-COVID times, I suppose.
So basically it's all online now because I've moved up north. So basically I use the Online Training Peaks platform and then I catch up with them once a week with a phone call. I think that's the best way to work, is because basically a coach athlete should have a relationship. So it's not a matter of me sending out a 4 or 6 week or 12-week training block every time, getting any feedback and just communicating emails. So it's very hard to establish a personal relationship just through emails. I think, if you're going to help an athlete, it's more of a relationship as well. So you need to have communication. If you don't have communication, then, it's hard to strike that relationship. It's hard for you as a coach to get them to buy into what you're trying to get them to do. Prime example, and a lot of people do it, is they run their easy runs too hard. So basically, someone new into running wants to go run hard every day, and because they're short of time, they may be only train 1 hour a day. They think, well, I can only do an hour a day. Let's make it a hard hour. And you're trying to get them to understand actually that you're working against yourself. You need to do zone 1 or zone 2 training. And, if you don't speak to them and haven't got a relationship, it's very hard for you to try and get them to buy into your way of coaching on that. So, yeah.
Wow. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because, emails are just words and people can attach meaning to them anyway. You could read one sentence and 5 different people, 5 different meanings. 100%. Absolutely. So as far as your wife, is she, I'm assuming, also a runner, and you guys train together?
Yeah, she's a really good runner. She's represented UK at the Trail World Champions a few years ago. So she's a really good runner. So yeah, she's kind of sacrificed her training this year for me, because she spent a month in the van basically looking after me. She did get a bit of exercise and dropping bikes off so I could follow a more linear route. But yeah, so we do a bit of running together, but she's a nurse, so she works during the day and I do most of my training during the day. But at the weekends, what we'll do is maybe go for a run together sometimes, or in the evening, I might do my second session with her. So I'll train in the morning and then go and run with her in the evening or stuff like that. So yeah, we do a fair bit of training together.
Awesome. And do you have any children?
No children.
No children. Well, it's good to have a nurse as your crew support too, because the medical component of that's been asked. That's fantastic. Excellent. Now, she followed along with you and moved more towards a plant-based diet as well?
Yeah, she's moved more towards the plant-based. I do most of the cooking in the house, so she didn't really get a choice. But she enjoys it as well. It's not like she's like missing anything. You know, and if she will have the occasional chicken or that if she's like at work and out for a lunch work or stuff like that. So again,
Sure.
she's not 100% strict to it, but I'd say 90% of her diet is plant-based, and I'd probably say 95 to 99% of my diet is plant-based.
Awesome.
Okay.
Do you work with your clients also with nutrition? Do you speak to them about foods that are going to be in, you know, helping performance and recovery?
Yeah, so I kind of chat through nutrition. I don't push plant-based onto them because it's a personal choice. And again, you know, you don't have to be plant-based to go and run really well at races. You know, it's not like I'm plant-based because that's why I achieved running all the Munros. That wouldn't, you know, I would have done it if I was eating chicken as well and beef. You know, it's not, you know, from a performance point of view, there's still no hard scientific evidence to say having a plant-based diet is going to give you a 2 or 5% performance increase. But I do advise athletes to obviously have a balanced, varied diet. And, you know, if they're getting protein from meats, make sure it's lean protein. And again, don't overdo red meat or fatty meats and that kind of stuff. And again, same if they're vegetarian or plant-based, you know, kind of try and avoid them on processed stuff, or try and avoid or limit vegan cheese or, you know, your ready meals that are heavily processed. So basically my nutritional philosophy is trying to eat as much whole food as possible, so less processed the better. So do your shopping in the fresh fruit aisle, fresh veg aisle, and like the fresh meat or dairy counter, rather than going into the dry goods stuff and that to a certain extent.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, the processed food is, I don't know if it's the same. I mean, so you said you've been to the US, and have you been through our grocery stores compared to Scotland? I'm always curious what it's like in different countries when you go shopping. I mean, I've been all over to different places, but not necessarily grocery shopping. So, I mean, is there any particulars that you find that are, it's better to be outside of the United States?
I find like when I went to the United States, I went with the Shinty team to play Shinty. So we were based at Stanford University. And I find Americas were two extremes. You're either really healthy and on the fitness streak, or you're really kind of didn't really care and you're on the obese streak. Like I find your portion sizes to be ridiculous when we eat it out. They're like portion sizes. And one of the things I do remember, it's quite a funny story. Like we all arrived late at night after a long haul, we went out for a meal, and we're all like, yeah, we'll have burgers and chips, and they came with burgers and crisps. And we're like, well, I thought we'd get chips with this. It's obviously a difference in dialogue. But generally, my experience from time in California, it really sticks out as actually your fresh fruit was amazing compared to back in the UK. And I find that in Europe as well. I find our fruit and veg is rubbish that we get here. I think we just get the rubbish lot. So when I go to Europe or in America, especially where we were in the whole foods bit, I found like your pineapples and just all your whole fruit was just really tasty compared to what the rubbish we get in the UK. And then same when I travel to the Alps, like France and Italy, I find the fruit and veg out there is like 10 times better.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't recommend coming to the UK for fruit and veg, but yeah. Yeah, I also hear a lot of bad stories about your meat. So
yeah, it's a good thing to be eating plant-based in the United States. There's many reasons. It's an interesting time for us.
It's interesting to have lots of Brexit and the US trade talk, and they're talking about lowering our meat quality standards, which doesn't affect me because I don't eat meat anymore. But it's kind of that's how I find that's how we're hearing a lot more about the US meat standards and chlorinated chicken. It's
really disturbing. And you know, my daughter is in Texas going to medical school. She's her 4th year, she'll graduate in May, and she's telling me the COVID cases of the meat packing plants, they've kept them open, and there's just the swell of COVID cases is just overwhelming hospitals. And I'm just thinking to myself, these are not essential workers. Let them go and be well. And I'm just sitting here going, we're so messed up in our philosophy. It is a really, it's an interesting time right now. Let's just say, I'll just leave it at that. So I try to.
It's interesting.
I try not to walk the political line, but right now it's like, where is the lack of, I don't know, just being, the amount of thinking that is lacking, I guess. But anyway, so your website is getactiverunning.com.
Yep.
And they can reach out to you there if someone wants to. And you work with international clients as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, obviously a lot of my listeners are in the US, so, and plant-based. And so they will totally appreciate, and a lot of runners. It seems to be my little crew. And it's exciting to see someone excel like you. And it's always so fascinating to me. That's why I started the podcast 4 years ago, was I was seeing these people literally go from 400 pounds, eating a plant-based diet, running ultra marathons like Josh Lajani and some other friends of mine. I was like, what was in your mind that allowed you to do that? But I can't get someone just to walk, around the block every day. So that psychology is so very important. And is that one of the things that you find the most interesting or challenging when working with people, is like what's going on between the ears?
Yeah, it can be the most challenging, you get different personalities. But yeah, like for yourself, it must be really hard trying to change people's habits. And again, as a coach, it's kind of something you've got to try and, you have to try and get alongside them, show a bit of empathy, and then trying to, show them there's a different way that might be slightly better, and trying to encourage them on that path. And it's very hard. Like, some people are very stuck in their ways, and, you get some athletes that'll join me, and you're questioning why they're joining, because they're like, I'm doing this, and this is what I do. And you're like, well, what are you paying me for then? If you've already decided this is what you want to do in training, and this is how you're going to approach it. And you're like, okay, well, we'll try it this way, or, I understand this could be good, but have you tried this, have you done this? It's kind of, you need to build a relationship up. But for you, trying to change people's eating habits, which is probably harder. It must be absolutely bang your head against the wall some days.
Well, it's funny. I'm family medicine, so I was in traditional medicine. I went to the Air Force, did my doctoring thing for 4 years, and I got to go to some really cool places, except for the Middle East. That was my least favorite. But I got to go to South America and do humanitarianships. I've been to Africa, and I'm just looking, and it's just a phenomenal experience. But when I got into plant-based medicine and lifestyle medicine 9 years ago, I didn't realize the hurdles. And I'd always tried to encourage people, because I was always active. And anyway, because you're in the military, right? You're going to be active whether you want to or not. And I've enjoyed that. But what was interesting was I really started focusing on very specific. And over the years, what I've learned is that, honestly, you just, like you said, meeting people where they're at, it's a very smart way to do that. But then also making the behavior so simple and so easy that they cannot fail, and then to celebrate, and then tying it to routine. I found those 3 principles work wonders. Like, make it small, make it easy, and tie it to something you're already doing, so it's not like you're building in a new routine. And so, like, when I started, I've been a runner for 30 plus years, off and on, not always, because you're raising 3 kids and being a mom and working. So because I'm going to be 50 at the end of the month, I was like, I've always wanted to be, and I've trained, I've done 1 marathon, I've done lots of other half marathons. I'd love to be able to run further. I was like, I need a really good base. I need to just start. And so about 3 months ago, or 2.5 months ago, I said, I'm just going to start running a mile a day. And every week I'll add a third of a mile. And now I'm up to 4 miles a day. And I was like, no injuries. And I'm just super excited. But by the end of the month, I'll be doing 5 miles a day, which will be a good base. And that's worked well for my mindset. But I tie it to the routine of walking my dog. I take the dog for a walk. I come back. My shoes are on. I go. Is that kind of where you work with people? That's the only thing I found that has been consistently working.
Yeah, like, one of the key things, especially with changing people's eating habits, is trying to get the idea is like, if you can stick to it for 3 weeks, because after 21 days, it becomes routine and you don't notice it. So as you were saying, it's about making small changes at a time, not completely ripping up the playbook and saying we're going to do everything totally different. It's about trying to make it, okay, we might change 1 or 2 things and we'll stick with that for 3 weeks, focus on that for 3 weeks until it becomes routine. And then you change something else. So again, same with training. If you're trying to change someone's approach to training, you might change 1 or 2 things and then explain to them, okay, focus on that for 21 days. And after 21 days, it becomes routine. It should be. And I say, once you're in a routine, it's great. So, if you're getting someone new into training that hasn't trained for a while, it's kind of in and out, sporadic, loses motivation. It's like, okay, we'll keep the session short like you did. And we'll just say, we'll get out 5 days a week. I don't care how long you run for, what you do, but we're out the door 5 days a week and just focus on that for the next 3 weeks. And once they're out the door in that routine, they built that time into their daily routine, then you can start kind of actually shaping it and molding it to more specific training. So yeah, very similar to what you do. It's, it's kind of trying to influence one thing at a time until they have that as routine and then go on and try and change something else.
Absolutely. It's that one little bit. And then it's almost like you feel compelled to do it. Like, I miss it. So that's actually really good advice. And that is really cool. I'm so excited. My husband sent me your article and he's like, you should try to get him on the podcast. And I was like, I know, this is very exciting. So I'm so excited that when you appreciated or agreed to come on. And can you, before, I know we had mentioned you're short on time here. Could you mind giving us one bit of advice for someone who maybe is seeing that they want to reach a really big goal like you did, and how would you approach it, or any other advice that you feel before we leave?
Because obviously we're looking to, obviously with COVID restrictions as well, not many races. And I say this to my athletes, is try and find something you want to achieve. And it doesn't have to be a race. So it could be, for example, running a marathon or setting a PB at a marathon. And then giving yourself enough time to train for that. So depending on where you're starting from to where you're going. And set a date. And then also tell your friends so you're accountable. So you need to commit to something. So obviously, I could easily say, okay, I'm going to try and beat my marathon PB and keep on saying it for like 3 or 4 months, but never set a date and never really tell anyone. Whereas if I set a date, say, okay, I'm going to do it on 25th of December, I'm going to run this distance or do that. And then I start telling my friends, you're accountable. It's like entering a race and telling your friends you're accountable to how you perform on that given day. So yeah, it's find something you kind of want to achieve and passionate about. So there's no point saying, okay, I want to go and set a marathon PB when you really just don't enjoy running on roads, but you enjoy running up hills. And again, it could be something small like, setting a PB on your usual training run. It doesn't have to be something across the world or linking up massive mountains. It could be just something on your back door that you're like, okay, I want to get faster going up this hill, or I want to link these 3 hills up, or do this, see how far I could run in 24 hours. Or the other craze that's going on is like Everest thing. So it's like climb the equivalent of Everest up and down a hill reps, doing hill reps till you've climbed Everest. So there's loads of different challenges you can set yourself, but the thing to do is commit to it. So set a date and then tell people about it.
I think accountability is so important. By the way, when you mentioned climbing Mount Everest, what you did was climbing like 14 Mount Everest, correct?
Yeah, I think someone's worked that out. I didn't really work that out, but yeah. For some reason, people like calculating ascent and Everests, which is a bit weird. It's like equivalent to 14 Everests. It's like, oh.
It's just a lot. I mean, because when living here in Colorado, I'm already at a mile high, and then you go and you can see the mountains that are 14,000 feet, and you're looking at Everest, which is twice that. You're just like, that just is so mind-boggling to me. And just it's crazy. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for everything. And I will put all your contact information, or my son will, he does my editing. And I'm super excited for people to reach out to you. So everyone, check out Donnie at getactiverunning.com. And he's got some really cool videos, and it's just a really neat thing to hear your story. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
Awesome.